Yeah.
George, if the attendees have questions, do we want to put them in the chat room?
I can monitor the chat room, and then if we open up for questions, we don't have too many attendees at this point. We may be able to take some questions online as well.
Okay.
We've been chatting a little bit this morning with a couple of attendees, so we'll be monitoring the chat room as well. I see we have a few more people joining. We're right at 10 o'clock, just a touch after 10. I think we'll probably just go ahead and get started in the interest of everybody's time, and try to move along with our session today. Nathaniel, are you prepared? Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, well, let me do a quick introduction then, and we'll get started. For the folks that have joined us since I made the announcement just a couple of minutes ago, I'm George Chastain. I'm the district training coordinator. My role here is really just try to put together some training sessions for our folks in the district. And we're very fortunate to have some very capable trainers with us today that will be leading the presentations. We apologize that we have to do this by Zoom and we can't do this face to face, but we're all dealing with the uncertainties of our current situation. And we're very thankful that we do have this ability to continue to provide training electronically. Today's session will be recorded. Any comments you make, those things will be on the recording. We will try to make that available for folks who are not able to join us this morning, maybe by YouTube or another method, so that the training session will be available to everybody in the next few days. We're very fortunate to have our district treasurer joining us today, who will be leading our session. Nathaniel Jones is a member of the Hilton Head Island Rotary Club. He's a 23-year member of Rotary and works in the financial services and has been involved with our finance team, with our treasurer's team, with the district, and is now will be taken over as our district treasurer. And we also have on the call today Deb Walworth. Deb is in the Creek Club. She's a 9-year Rotary Treasurer's Committee and will be providing some of the training today as well. And very fortunate to have Paul Walter on the call as well. Paul, as most of you know, is our district governor nominee and will be serving as a district governor and has served for several years, number of years, as our district treasurer. So I'm sure that if there are questions, Paul will have the answers for us, and we'll turn to him. We will be monitoring chat, so if you have questions, you can submit those through the chat, and we'll try to get to those. We don't have, looks like we're going to get close to 30 participants today, so we may not be able to do a lot of questions during the session, but we'll try to get to those as much as we can. So at this point, I will turn this over to our district treasurer, Nathaniel.
Hi all, welcome to the call, and I assume you all are seeing my screen, the training seminar page, and I'm just going to start going through. If anybody has, if they want to go back a slide or something, just let me know. So here we go. One of the things in that George alluded to, the fact that we had been trying, when I came on as treasurer, kind of, I guess that was in July, to take the pressure off Paul, is when we go to various functions, it seems to be a lot of transit time for an hour meeting. So I welcome this opportunity to try to do more Zooms so that our time is spent is an hour as opposed to 3 hours, an hour in the meeting and an hour transit each way. So in that regard, what we want to do is kind of go through kind of what, and Paul gave this presentation, I think in 18, but a soup to nuts of issues that come up in your capacity as treasurer-elect that we see happening throughout the course of the year. And as part of that is the registration, the main events that we traditionally have, although this year some of them were abbreviated or aborted or combined, but there's PETS training, there's the district assembly, and there's the foundation seminar. And it's important that the clubs kind of view how much participation they're going to have in that, and make sure they budget the appropriate training for their clubs so that it's a known entity and there's not a surprise or they feel like we didn't have it budgeted so we can't send anybody. So we're trying to get out in front and encourage people to budget as we go through the process. Next, we talk about the club invoice, and what you end up getting is you get an RI invoice, and Paul can kind of speak to this because in my capacity, I haven't seen the particular RI invoice, but you get it in July and January, and it's important that you respond, because if you don't pay your RI dues after a certain point in time, and Deb can speak to this, you take a chance of getting, I don't know what the appropriate word is, kicked out of Rotary. We had a club this year that had an issue with paying it, and it's a laborious process to kind of go through a reinstatement process, if I use the right language, Deb?
Yes. And both the club I was in Michigan back in 2008 and the club I'm in now had problems with previous treasurers not doing what they should have been doing. I just find the bad club.
And I wanted, as a part of this presentation, just for those who've been in Rotary prior to 2015, they may know this invoice is the semi-annual report of the SAR, but now it's club invoice from Rotary International.
And feel free if and I'm sorry, I'm now illuminated. The sun is moving past my skylight, so I am kind of dark in my image that I'm seeing. That will change in a few minutes. But if for some reason you don't have it, feel free to reach out to me for help with this, as opposed to don't want someone to say that they didn't want to bother us and let this issue lapse, and then we've got to spend a lot of time at the district level getting things reinstated. So this is a summary of the dues that are set for this current year. So we send a bill out. The district sends a bill. You see the second line there with the 20 per member, October 1st and April 1st. And we just send it out April 1st. And I just got a payment a few minutes ago coming in as clubs pay, and we'll get to the ways to pay that going forward. But essentially, you have, I just want to run through the dues so everyone's aware. You've got your Rotary International dues, $34.50 per member, and that is $34.50 in July and $34.50 in January. So a total of $69. You've got your district dues, $20 per member, and that's the bill, the invoice that I sent to the treasurers. And in some clubs, it goes to the treasurer. I have some clubs where I send it to generally the treasurer and the president. Some clubs have requested it go to 4 people. But that's the bill that we send out, that Deb prepares and that I send out April 1st and October 1st. Then there's the Rotarian magazine, and that's $6 per member, and comes from the RI. That's the July, January bill. And then there are 3 other charges that in July Rotary charges for kind of administrative issues. The directors and officers insurance, which is 44 cents a member just in July. The RI general liability insurance, $2.90 a member in July. And then a council and legislation, which we believe is, and the last 3 are our best effort at this point. Rotary could change those before July 1st, but we believe it's going to be 44 per member for D&O, $2.90 for the general liability, and $1 per member for council on legislation. Those numbers do change each year, but this is what we've been led to believe. So grand total, the way it stands right now, those accumulate to a total of $125.34 for RI and the district dues. And then you have club dues that the clubs invoice separately, or they may put it with part of their RI dues there. So that's what's coming out, and you generally see them July 1st and January 1st, that they come from RI. They come from the district on October 1st and April 1st. Any questions on that page? Because I think like a couple years ago it was 115, so it's gone up a little bit, although I think the council and legislation actually dropped from a couple years ago.
And those Nathaniel's correct. We won't know those amounts with regard to the insurance until later. When I've checked in the past, I mean, it's been sometime in June when they set those, but they're typically off, maybe by pennies. It's not a huge change.
The next slide is the payment methods. Some clubs elect to pay by check, but the easiest way is online.
This is for payment of RI.
This is for RI dues, excuse me. Where you can click when they send it to you, you can go online and pay that way. Obviously, you need a credit card, or you mail them, and that's the address. We've had some cases this year where some people mailed some payments into RI. They weren't sure what the payments were for, and they weren't sure where they mailed them, but they had a check they could see on their bank statement. And working with Sandy, the foundation chair, she's been working with the club to try to ascertain what they were, and they were just RI deposited, but they were attributed to the wrong source. So, and there's a window that you can get that straightened out. So it's real clear to use this address and mark clearly what it is, or put a copy of the invoice they send with the check, so it can get deposited to the right and credited to the right place. As I mentioned, the failure to pay RI dues will cause loss of club's charter, and there are expenses and aggravation to get reinstated. we did have a club this year that had an issue, and Johnny had to get involved to get them reinstated. But you can see at the bottom that if you're terminated, you have 5 months to fulfill the reinstatement requirements. And Deb went through something with that in a prior club she had. And you want to add anything, Deb, to?
Well, actually, it was the Rotary Club of Goose Creek, and I was attending a training session, and back when they were in Sumter, and I was being told to leave because our club had been kicked out. And luckily, there were enough people that knew me from going to the other various trainings that Lou Mello and Sandy Brooks kind of stood up for me, and our club got things straightened out. And then the following July, I took over as treasurer. So we haven't had any problems since. But my former club was dropped by the IRS, which will come later in this program.
Okay. Thank you. Next, this is a copy of a club invoice, roughly what it looks like from RI. So if you're not familiar, you'll get one like this, and realizing that they could easily change the format, but this is what it looks like from RI. And then we get to what the district sends out. Again, October 1st and April 1st. And generally what we do is we use DACDB as a source of who the current president is in the new year and the treasurer. So it's important to put that in, because before the bills go out in October, I go through all the presidents and the treasurers and go into each club invoice and modify the email addresses they're being sent to. And if it ends up going to someone who's not there, what happened this year is someone said, I'm not the treasurer anymore, even though it says in DACDB, please send it to this person, and I just modify it going forward. So it's easy to do, but it's important to have DACDB up to date on who, starting July 1, who the president is and who the treasurer is, so that we can get the bills to the right person. And then they're payable pretty much as soon as their deposit, they're sent. We're not waiting 30, 60, or 90 days for collection. So I have had some clubs that actually paid the day that we sent the bill. So most clubs will have already collected the money. So we're just trying to let people know October 1st and April 1st, the bills will be coming. And so we're basically collecting the October 1st is for the first half of the year. The April 1st is for the second half of the year, recognizing the year ends on June 30th, but we're allowing clubs, because a lot of clubs don't have their major fundraisers till the spring. That's why the April 1st date is chosen. Okay, any questions on that? All right, and here's what a bill from our district looks like. And that is, you get that, you can view the invoice, there's the invoice, and the preferred method is to pay with ACH. And you just click on the QuickBooks link, put your routing and account number, and it immediately debits it there, and it posts across to the district's checking account, and we get an alert saying this club has paid. So as we monitor the accounts receivable, we're up to date with whatever's happened. Alternatively, you can mail the check, and there's the address to mail it to, and that mail is checked every day, and we deposit the checks as we get them in. So we're very current on what our receivables are. And then after 30 days, we give a little summary to the district governor as to where we stand with collections. And depending on the situation, he'll say, well, let's give it a little bit more time, or he may make some calls and start kind of nudging people to pay.
Well, we'll send, just to clarify too, we'll send a subsequent notice out on 30 days later. And then if they're still not paid, we'll send out another one 30 days later. But that's ACH preferred methods in red for a reason. If at all possible, you can pay it via ACH. It makes the process that we don't have to touch anything other than seeing it go into the account. And for as much as we get paid for doing this job, we appreciate it going that way. And if you want to vote to double our salary, please make that motion. And we'll double yours.
Deb alluded to the IRS filing, and this is probably this year. I probably got 4 or 5 questions from treasurers. Each club is required to file either a 990, a 990N, or a 990EZ, and the determination is really based on what the annual gross receipts are. So for the N, it's less than 50,000. It's really what's called a postcard filing. Very simple. If you qualify, it takes all of about 2 minutes to do, because I do one for another nonprofit, and they have less than 50,000. So I just do it, and it's accepted within about 5 minutes of submission. My record has been, and I do it in early April. So the IRS is very quick on acknowledging receipt and acceptance of the submission. The 990EZ is when you're over 50 but under 200, and your assets at the year end are under 500,000. And the full 990, which is a little more laborious, is when your annual gross receipts are over 200 and your assets at year end are over 500. And these all need to be done prior to November 15th for the year that ended on June 30th. Anything you want to add to this, Deb?
Most clubs should not have a problem with doing it by November 15th, but if you do have any questionable transactions that you are still trying to unravel, they will allow you to file an extension, which luckily I did in filing for the year that ended June 30th, 2008. We had some people managing a club that had no idea what they were doing, and there was a trust involved, and a donation came in that should not have gone to a 501c4. It was supposed to, according to the will and the trust agreement, go to a 501c3, and it passed through our hands. And I said, we can't file this. So we filed an extension, got it into a 501c3 along with all the interest that it received in our club's account. And then I filed it with a schedule of the interest to show everything went where it was supposed to go before filing it with the IRS. And about a month later, the family the donation came from, they were being audited by the IRS. So the fact that the IRS already had the schedule I created, they went from being told they were being penalized hundreds of thousands of dollars and owing a lot of tax to everything being okay based on the fact that I saw the problem, that funds were handled incorrect, and filing that extension allowed time to have everything fixed before it became final.
Okay. Yeah. And I just want to mention, if there's a question and the treasurers aren't sure, feel free to reach out. It's a lot easier to, if we don't know the answer, we can bounce it off each other, or in many clubs, there's a CPA that we could inquire. and try to resolve it. It takes less time to do it on the front end than trying to go back to the IRS and say we had a problem or we missed this or whatever. So you're not out there by yourself. We're trying to do this. We just can't do all the clubs ourselves. So you're the boots on the ground, but I just want you to know that we're here. So reach out to us, and if you have a question or need help with something, we'll get the resources to get you what you need. There's a financial assessment, which is a one-page form that needs to be done annually. And it's for the club year ending June 30th of 2020. And it needs to be either mailed to me or scanned to me October 1st, and with the attachments. And here is what the form looks like. What we're trying to do is just keep a pulse on the financial viability of our clubs. We're not micromanaging it to compare and critique anybody, but we're trying to just make sure we've got a good idea on the viability of each club. So we have this questionnaire that it literally takes a few minutes to fill out, and then the attachments are the clubs. A lot of them put a financial statement or compared the last 2 years and just send it back to me, and that's what we've got it there. So I just take a look at it and make sure. Okay, one of the key things you see is when was the 990 filed, and because it has a deadline of October 15th and you have till November 15th, some clubs have already filed it. Others say we intend to file it by November 1st or whatever like that. And that's fine to put on that form. Paul, you want to add anything to this?
And I would just say that the individuals that would be completing this form, as it says at the bottom, are signing, would be the club treasurer, club president, a club member. I would want to get a club member that has nothing to do with the financial responsibility of the club to help you with this process, so that you are getting a third party in there, or a second pair of eyes. And this is really just, it's a reminder that you may need to be doing these things and making certain that the accountability of the finances of the club can be reviewed on an annual basis. And the form we have had and should have on the database, and maybe George can speak to that as to where it will be on the database, or we'll let you know. But in the past, we've had that on the database for you to download.
I don't know where it will be on the database, but I'm sure it will be. That is something that that Bill Oliver, our district secretary, is working to try to clean up the database and make things a little more accessible and easier to find. I'm sure that Bill will get that posted. And I'll go ahead and mention too, at this point, before we leave, get too far away from the 990, we had a question on the chat. If one of you could respond to a question on the chat of where can you get the 990 form?
The 990 form is available at irs.gov. If you go to the site, it will give you a link for the clubs that just have to do the 990, and there's a link to do it electronically. If you need to do the 990 EZ or the 990, then I suggest your club have an accountant do it, because it's very tedious to do it by paper if you're big enough to have the EZ. When I lived in Michigan, I used to file the 990 EZ for that club because it was a bigger club than the one I belonged to in Goose Creek. But I do suggest doing it through software, or having a CPA do it if your club is big enough to have to file.
Thank you, Deb.
Okay. Thanks, Deb. As I mentioned before, in DACDB, request all club president update the mailing address and the email address for their clubs. We had a few invoices that the prior treasurer sent me an email saying, I'm not the treasurer anymore, and we don't use that PO box. And it was right what had been in DACDB. So, once we were notified, we were able to change it. But if the new president could just make sure as of July 1 that everything is current, it just makes life a little bit easier. And also the information for the treasurer and or the check signer is in there.
Oh, can we go back a moment to the 990? Something that
Yeah.
wasn't mentioned is if you fail to file for 2 years in a row, your club can lose its status as a nonprofit organization. If your club does fail to file, like when I moved here in 2010, nobody could even tell me the last time that Rotary Club of Goose Creek had filed a tax return. So it was a lot of work for me to file as far back as they wanted when we got the letter shortly after I had joined. And with my club in Michigan, our club actually did lose its status, and it required catching up with the IRS, then getting the club president to write a letter to Rotary International. And once Rotary International had the letter from the club president, that was sent to the IRS and status was regained. It was relatively simple, but just kind of a pain to be dealing with, especially when you have just joined Rotary and are dumped with everything that I was dumped with when I joined. But it's not a difficult process. It's just one you have to be patient through. So best to file and not lose your status.
And if you file a 990N, I know with the charity that I do, you can go in and it shows you the prior year's filing when they were submitted when you do it online. So you can see if it was done, and you set up a password, and the only thing that you do is change the address of the new president. So that if the IRS wants to contact the president of your club, they have a mailing address to send it to. But other than that, it's very straightforward and very easy to do. Thanks, Deb. Now we're going to get into something that's near and dear to Deb's heart, the IRS tax designation. There's a lot of question, and we got a few of them this year about 501c3 versus 501c4. And correct me if I'm wrong, Deb, but my reading of the IRS is all I printed something out that a 501c4 is a social welfare group and can engage in more advocacy and lobbying. So that all clubs should be a 501c4, all Rotary clubs.
All Rotary clubs are 501c4 by definition.
Right.
And many clubs also have a 501c3, but that does not make the 501c4 go away. The club
Right.
is still a C4 and their foundation is a C3.
And so if someone makes a charitable donation, unless they make it to the entity that's the 501c3 in a club, if they have a foundation, it is not tax deductible.
Correct.
And the district is a 501c4. So if that's why you see there's Rotary and then the Rotary Foundation, because the foundation is a 501c3, whereas Rotary itself is, I don't believe it is.
No, it can't be.
Right. So.
But one thing, and this is what often confuses people, is the clubs can collect the $25 per member for, Paul Harris to send it to the Rotary Foundation. Clubs can collect money for polio or for the annual fund and have the treasurer go in online and designate which member gave how much. And that is still tax deductible, and members will get an email tax receipt. But if the club is doing something, for raising money for scholarships or raising money for something else, those are not tax deductible. When we give our change for CART, that's not tax deductible. But if you were to write a check to CART and have your treasurer mail it in along with the club donation, then your check is tax deductible. And we frequently have members that want to claim money to CART or, money that they gave towards our scholarship when that is not a charitable donation.
Right, and one way, there's certainly expenses associated with setting up a 501c3 and maintaining it. But one way our club has found an alternative is a community foundation. Have them set it up, and then when you give to that entity, then it's tax deductible, and it acts as a conduit, and it can come back to the club, but it was given in a tax deductible manner.
Mm-hmm.
Paul, you want to add anything?
I was just going to say the same thing. And if you have a community foundation in your community that is willing to do that, certainly check into it versus having to go through the process of becoming a 501c3 yourself. One time I did check with our community foundation here in Hilton Head. They appeared to be willing to take on additional Rotary clubs should they want to go through the foundation. I would have to check and ask them if they would still be willing to do that. But I would look into your own community. If there's a community foundation you can go through, that is the easiest and seems to be the most efficient way of getting the tax deductibility for the person giving the funds.
And it especially becomes helpful if you have a fundraiser where the donations are of a smaller amount, and therefore it's very labor intensive in terms of bookkeeping and things like that. And people think, well, I'm giving to Rotary, it's tax deductible, but if it's just going to the Rotary Club of XYZ, it's not. So that's how a foundation can really make that process simpler, and then have everything tax deductible, and they take care of all the legwork. And then here's my contact information. I prefer email. I have a full-time job and I work for myself, so it's very cumbersome to change into my non-paying job in the middle of the day. I do it sometimes, but I prefer to kind of take care of all this stuff when I have opportunities. And since I'm investments, that's really after 4 o'clock. But if you give me an email, it's a lot easier for me to respond anytime and get right back to you, or say, I'll research that and either contact Paul or Deb and, forward a link along to try to get the right resources applying to the problem as expeditiously as possible. So does anybody have any questions or anything about what we covered or what we didn't cover? George, are you getting any? George, you're muted.
I'm muted now. Am I unmuted now? We do have one comment. If you utilize a community foundation, there's some restrictions about how the money in the fund may be used. Make sure you understand any restrictions. So that's a comment. Otherwise, I think I shared the questions we've got. Does anyone else have a question they want to share through the chat? And I'm monitoring chat. You're also, I think, able to unmute your microphone if we've got 1 or 2 questions. If not, let me go ahead and say at this point to Nathaniel and Paul and Deb, how much we appreciate you taking your time both to serve Rotary and taking your time this morning to put together this session for us, for the club treasurers. I think it's been a good session. We'll make this recording of the session available. I believe we're going to try to do that through our district YouTube channel. We'll try to figure that out and get that up and let folks know that this is available if anyone wants to look at it again. I see a few comments coming in the chat saying thank you and great, good session, clear and concise. So thank you so much for putting the session together. Before we drop off, I will say I think I saw that our district governor-elect Pauline joined the
Yes.
call as well. So is on the call. I don't know if you want to say anything, Pauline, while you've got on.
I do. I'm unmuted, right? So you can hear me?
Well, I can hear you.
All right. So this was excellent. I want to, thank you all, the trainers. I know you had to pull together a new format for something that we've planned for having in person, but just seeing everything. So hopefully we'll get to that pretty soon. And I look forward to working with you during 2021. Thanks for taking advantage of our training. And thank you, George. Good job again.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks, George.
Well, thank you all. And thank you, Pauline. And I want to say one more thank you before we end the call. I want to thank Terry Moore for helping us with the technology. Terry does an awful lot for the district behind the scenes that you may not see. It does a lot for our district, and does a lot to help us get these Zoom calls together and coordinate things for the district. And he's on the call as well. And I want to thank him for doing that and all he does for us. So
Thanks, Terry. Glad you have power.
So thanks, everybody. With that, I think that's the end of the session. We'll make this available. Thank you for coming and joining us this morning. And we will, I do see a question that just popped up about the presentation, the PowerPoint. And I think we probably can make that available. We'll look into a way of probably, we'll either make that available on the district website. I think it's the easiest way because I'm not sure I have everybody's accurate email address for what's on for folks on the call. So maybe we can put that up in the files on the district database, but we'll send out something to let you know about that. So thank you so much. And thanks for joining us. And we'll end the session now.
Thank you.
Thank you.